expected at least 5 other people watching, but there isn't anyone else. Okay, so we are now on live. Sorry about the echo. Ah, there's another one named Simon Petrikov. Okay, so we're on live now. So how do we go about with this stream? Guys?
Yeah, so
Oh, anyway, hey, Royal Philosopher, I'm Babylon Thought.
Oh, right, I forgot to introduce to him Royal Philosopher.
That's fine. I think he muted himself or something.
Royal Philosopher.
oh, sorry, that was by accident. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But yes, nice to meet you too.
All right.
So, how do we go
Yes.
about this?
Well, I suppose we could start with Charlottesville if you want to.
Okay. Now, how do we talk about Charlottesville? Because I'm not very good at articulating.
Well, there's multiple things we could talk about. The torchlight protest that about 100 or so white supremacists marched in, and what those implications are. We could talk about the obvious, the main headline event, which was the killing of Heather Heyer. We could talk about a bunch of things. So really, whatever you want to start, I'm good with.
Okay. I would just okay. Now then, so what are your thoughts on the Charlottesville incident, such as the rally or the counter protests with the rally, which technically that was a riot.
You asking me or him first?
That was you, Royal Philosopher.
Okay. Well, I cannot say I'm surprised. As you may know, or some people watching may know, I have personally taken the onus of defending liberty from people who wish to hijack it. The liberty movement in the United States wish to hijack it, who are the alt-right. I've taken the onus of defending liberty from that, and I was fearful that something like this would happen. I was fearful that it would extend beyond the boundaries of the digital platform, which is the internet, and into the real world, where blood would be spilled, and blood was spilled. In all reality, I think this is twofold. Number one, the pretense of this rally was quote unquote unite the right. Unite the right against what exactly? Unite the right against, I mean, if you were to talk in strict political terms here, the Republican Party has control of both houses of Congress. They have control of a majority of state legislatures. They have control of a majority of state houses. They have a majority, almost a majority, I think, a majority on the Supreme Court. So unite right against what? Against this regressive, I would call, social force that has been showing its presence throughout the media, Antifa, many feminist groups. And I think that's part of what the alt-right was responding to. But I also think they were also responding to the perceived deterioration of the white race in America, which is basically this thing called white genocide, that there is a influx of people from outside of the country, that are non-whites, or non-whites called ethnically, right? And they are essentially eroding the white European born culture that was America. And that's what they were screaming. That's why they were screaming, "You will not replace us," during the Torchlight rally. In all reality, and I'll talk more about these things as the stream goes on, it's ludicrous and it's scary at the same time. But I would caution people who would think that this is a particularly unique time in American politics to look back at the Vietnam age, look back when there were hundreds upon thousands of protesters in the streets getting hosed, look back at the incident in Ohio at a university campus. The police hosed and you killed a few students back in the 60s. I mean, there have been worse times. But I do not think there have been more widely broadcasted times, and I think that's the main thing that is happening here. That's all.
Okay. What about you, Babylon Thought? Or in this case, Severian. What is the full username in this case?
This is my main account, not my main account, but I would say it's a personal account. Yeah, Severian is what it would be called. But yeah, for purposes, we can just go by Babylon, just for purposes of the stream. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Philosopher just said. I think that the Unite the Right rally is really just a sign of how far, I don't know if you would say the horseshoe effect has gone in terms of the other direction. We've gone from the ludicrous identity politics on the left to ludicrous identity politics on the right in the form of white identity politics. And both are just extreme forms of just rabid collectivism in
Absolutely.
And it doesn't, there's a common argument among people in the alt-right, and I think there's some merit to this idea that, well, if you're going to have identity politics for minorities and women and the gay community, why not have identity politics for white people? Why is there a double standard here? And I agree with this. There is a double standard. But at the same time, I don't think the correct course of action is to employ the left's their strategy of identity politics against them, because I think in the long run it will only backfire in the fight for liberty going forward. And as we can see, most people in the alt-right aren't concerned with liberty. If you look at the tweets of somebody like Richard Spencer, a prominent alt-right figurehead, this is somebody who is pro-socialism. This guy is for universal healthcare. He's even tweeted out things in favor of Marx. I don't have it in front of me, but
absolutely,
basically what he was saying was, well, Marx got a few things right. Capitalism has run amok and all this stuff, and it's better for the white race to have a socialist ethno-state. And I don't think that's a good thing moving forward. One last thing, and we can talk more about this going down in the stream, and I'm making a video about this right now, actually, about the left's whitewashing of Antifa and the left-wing violence, in order to just highlight the white nationalists. But that's something that also bothered me a lot during the coverage of this event, and this idea that somehow, essentially, it's okay to uphold and glorify an ideology that has murdered hundreds of thousands of people just because it doesn't have as many racial connotations as Nazism does. So those are my initial thoughts.
Sorry about the beep in the background. That was from my cell phone. We have to keep in mind that the alt-right is slowly denouncing Spencer for being, well, as close as I could say, the alt-right equivalent of Milo Yiannopoulos, meaning, and I think I mispronounced his last name in this case, because Spencer is basically an attention whore, to say the least.
If I might add.
Which means, wait, what is it, Royce and Philosopher?
If I might add, to respond to a few things Babylonian said, and to respond to what you just said. So you're right. There was a profound double standard in the media, particularly with CNN when the president said that we condemn all hate groups. Personally, I'll say this. For me, that wasn't enough. For me, the president should have said, in my opinion, that he condemns white ethno-fascists, which was exactly what Richard Spencer and Kernovich and their ilk are. They are white ethno-fascists. Now, the reason why this is a big deal for me is because these are the people that the president, I don't know if it was wittingly or unwittingly, courted during his campaign. These are the people that his sons, Eric Trump and Don Trump, retweeted constantly, their memes. These are the kind of people that he has been softly playing to. I'm not saying he's a racist, because there's really no basis to that argument. In fact, when we look at his past history, I would say he's everything but racist. But I do think that he is being he was initially very soft on the issue of particularly the alt-right. And I think that whenever evil rises, the president or any other official in the country should call evil by its name and not hide and run into the mountains and say, oh, we condemn all evil. Yes, we condemn all evil, but do you condemn the specific type of evil has risen and has materialized and has taken away the life of an innocent activist who was simply peacefully protesting her will, peacefully protesting her beliefs? That is something that I had a problem with in terms of that. But obviously double standard. You're right. Antifa, they were not covered as aggressively as they could have been. I believe I saw publications like the New York Times and others who tend to lean towards the left attempt to whitewash the Antifa thing. But I'll give credit to the NAACP and the SAPLC. They actually have called Antifa violent, and these are major left-wing groups. They have called Antifa violent. They have denounced them, and that's a good thing in my opinion. But there are still those on the left, like Chris Matthews, who claims he didn't know who Antifa was, which is kind of odd to me since they've been almost at every major rally, every major political event since 2016 election, even before then. You have others who just claim ignorance because they understand it's indefensible. You cannot defend taking a tire iron and whacking someone in the head. You cannot defend wearing a mask and acting like this is Kristallnacht Nazi Germany and literally destroying stores and destroying people's property. You cannot defend that kind of reprehensible behavior in a civilized society. No one can. So I've seen ignorance from the left, and I've seen whitewashing from the left. It needs to stop. It's ridiculous. In reference to Richard Spencer being an attention whore, I don't think that's the truth. I think Richard Spencer, to be honest, is a very serious force to reckon with. I say this because of his event at Auburn University in Alabama, I think. He fought tooth and nail to get into that college. Initially, that college said they didn't want anything to do with him, anything at all. So they said you cannot come to our facility. Since it is a public college, he went to the courts, got an injunction, and he was let in. And my goodness, the kind of rhetoric that was spewed at that rally, him saying that we're not into the individualism and the freedom, the liberty in 21st century America, in front of a crowd full of young people, and half of the crowd being in his favor, was something that was truly disturbing and truly scary. Many write them off as a fringe, minority, like Ben Shapiro does. But I don't think they're a fringe minority. I think they are a minority, but they are growing, and they are growing strongly because he is tapping into a sentiment that is closely connected to identity, which is also closely connected to the person's being, which is influencing them to be so galvanized by him. He's not an attention whore. Milo Yiannopoulos is an attention seeker, I should say. I shouldn't say the other word. Because he brings no substance to the table. Literally none. He serves to agitate. He serves to make people upset. Saying stuff like lesbians don't exist or that it doesn't serve to actually further the movement that he is purporting to serve. It doesn't serve to further any productive conversation. It serves to get more likes on his Twitter page, which is defunct now, or his Facebook page. That's all. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Now, how do I speak about this? What was supposed to think? What was it? Yes. In regards to Richard Spencer, you watched the Auburn speech.
The entire thing.
And Babylon Thought, you said that he is a socialist, right? Well, how did you know? I mean, someone recommended me, which I will get maybe much later into the stream on the person who said that to me. So he recommended to me that I watch that his left-wing expressions were stated at the Auburn speech, and well, I tried to watch them, but for some reason I couldn't find any economic views, just his views on identity. So I couldn't understand what was he talking about his, socialist views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't seen the speech you're referring to, but I've seen about his economic views have mainly come from his social media presence from his Twitter feed, him
Yes.
directly saying these things. So I'm not aware if there are more in-depth videos and interviews of him speaking about his economic views, but that's largely the basis of my knowledge of what his views on economics are.
And so I understand the tweet that Babylonian Thought is referencing to. I actually saw it a bit earlier today. And he basically said that Marx is right in saying that capitalism establishes a bourgeoisie or proletarian class of some sort.
Right.
Yeah, and that, now let's be logical. Let's not say he said X, therefore we should assume that everything else he says is not credible. I don't think it's credible to begin with because the merits of it is false, but merely by saying it, that doesn't mean it's not credible. I think that in some sense, it exposes his socialistic tendencies, I would say, but I wouldn't call him a full-fledged or even in part worshiper of Marx at all. Because,
no, I don't either.
Because, Marx was a Jew. And I think Marx was a Jew at least, and that would be rather problematic for anyone in the right nationalist little crowd to worship.
Oh no, I'm not saying he worshipped Marx. I was just saying what you were saying, that the Marx tweet indicates his socialist tendencies, and a number of his other tweets where he's speaking about socialism sort of, I would say, indicates his affinity for, I have to say it, National Socialism. No.
Yeah.
I was about to say something about National Socialism. By that logic of what Spencer said, well, judging from his nationalist views and then his socialist views, that would be a form of National Socialism. But I need to be clear that I'm not saying National Socialism as in someone who supports Hitler's ideology. I'm saying National Socialism in a sense of, well, socialism in general with nationalist leanings. It doesn't have to be based on Hitler's teachings.
Sure.
Right.
You can look back to Mussolini, for instance, the father of fascism.
Yes, that goes back to Mussolini's fascism.
And to add to that, I think, and a lot of the arguments I've seen from the alt-right, like for Mangalore, who I debated on two occasions. The first occasion I did bad on, the second occasion I did much better on, by the way. Just about clear. They tend to use rather collectivist terminology. For example, one of the arguments they use against diversity in society and for the voluntary repatriation, which is basically giving people cash or giving people an incentive to leave the country so they can go back to their homeland, this mythical idea of the white European homeland being America, all this nonsense. Essentially, they believe that diversity is antithetical to a heuristic, a cohesive society. And they based this also off of a study done by a Harvard professor who apparently endeavored to find that diversity was a good thing and apparently found that it was a bad thing in some circumstances. And they used this one study as an end-all be-all to, gotcha anyone who tries to say, well, diversity is good. No, we have a study here. Someone tried to prove that it was good and it's bad. So they use rather collective approach. They don't consider the individual. The very nature of their ideology is nothing to do with the individual. I've posed this question to them multiple times. If the individual contributes to society, is not trying to change its general makeup, is not trying to change its ideology, then what is the harm of having the individual in that society, in your ethnocentric society? And essentially what it boils down to is that people will not like the individual simply because of his skin complexion. So we're dealing with collectivists here. So if they have socialist tendencies, they most certainly do, then I'm not surprised. But I wouldn't necessarily call all of them Nazis. The alt-right is a very multifaceted, a very diverse group. But the people at the forefront are most definitely, they seem like the manifestation of the Nazi Party in the 21st century, I would say.
Okay, then. Now, a comment upon the Charlottesville incident or riot. Have have both of you watched anything from a user named Fritz Imperial?
I have not.
I've heard the name, but I don't think I've seen the video you're referring to.
Well, just give me a moment. Just give me a moment. Okay, in his in one of his recent videos titled #Charlottesville and the End of Liberalism, he said that the Charlottesville incident is not actually that surprising, except one new element: a death of one of the participants from the other side, not counting the two. Not counting the two who died in the helicopter crash, which I don't even know. Which I don't even know if that was an accident or foul play, but it's very likely to be an accident. The fact that someone died, and I still don't know who was. Well, I know the name of the driver, but I don't know his leanings. But it doesn't matter. He will be convicted of a felony, but I don't know which one. Either, let's see, murder because of road rage, or manslaughter because it was unnecessary to defend himself like that. And well, previous similar events weren't that surprising because there was no death involved, but this time it was slightly different, but still not surprising according to Fritz's view, because it's still the same minus the death of someone from the other side. But it, as the royal philosopher pointed out, it was still a scary event. And when he said something about Richard Spencer being very scary, well, that's I thought too. But remember when I said that more of the alt-right is starting to denounce Richard Spencer for being too similar to Milo? This implies to me that they are scarier than I thought, and that Spencer is relatively tame.
Yes.
Otherwise, Jared Taylor would be the much better leader.
I'm not sure about that, but okay.
You don't know who's Jared Taylor?
Not so sure about that. But no, it's not that I don't know, man. It's not sure he would be the better leader, though. I don't. To be honest, I think if the alt-right really wants to, I'm not trying to give them any tips because I debate them as a hobby. I'm not trying to give people tips. But if they genuinely want their movement to go anywhere, Richard Spencer is probably the most active, the most known, and probably he's actually the least articulate white supremacist. Oh, no, ethno-fascist I've seen. They do have better people who can speak better about this, about their views. Richard Spencer is not one of them. But you're right. The fact that they're distancing themselves from him is rather concerning. It's rather concerning because if this guy is like Milo to you, and he's has called for the voluntary repatriation of any non-white cultures and ethnicities in America, and he has called for the end to individualism, the end of capitalism, the end to free markets, the end to this notion that it's happy-go-lucky. He has called for statism on almost every single level to be increased. If this guy is too tame for you, you're right. They are probably more far to the right than I thought they were, because he is a statist mafia fascist essentially. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay, then. What about you, Babylon? Any thoughts or responses to what Royal Philosopher has just said?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not, okay, so the group that was present at Charlottesville, they definitely seemed like they were very capable of committing lots of harm to a lot of innocent people. People like Christopher Cantwell and
Yes.
Others that were there, the David Duke types. But I'm still not convinced that they're a major threat to our civilization. Because, you know, from what I've seen, most voices on the alt-right are these anonymous sock accounts who just, I don't even want to call it shit posting, because most shit posters are actually doing it as a joke. And there's a lot of people in the alt-right who actually mean what they say when they'll tweet horrendous anti-Semitic imagery and slurs to people like Shapiro and other prominent Jewish conservatives and probably liberals too. But I definitely am concerned with this movement growing, and I definitely think it's the responsibility of somebody with the influence of the presidency to denounce them. And you know, obviously, okay, in his defense, as many people have been making, you know, he eventually did it, but I would agree with Royal Philosopher that, you know, it's a little too late, because I think that if he had just done it immediately, that would have been done so much good for his optics. That would have been done so much good to put the media at ease and to get them off his case. And I think, you know, we definitely need to pay attention to these guys, make sure that we keep them at arm's length at all times.
Right. I have a few distinctions to make to your to the answer you just gave.
Sure.
Number one, you say that alt-right is not a very serious threat. I've noticed you made the claim, but you made no justification for the claim. So if you would kindly, may I know what exactly makes you think that they are not a serious threat? Because to me, a serious threat is people marching through a college town in Virginia, yelling blood and soil, yelling you will not replace us with tiki torches, and literally getting in brawls with people who are shouting and saying, you know, and telling obscenities at them, literally initiating violence without even being necessarily physically provoked, which is only unrestricted with violence to be initiated. So that's kind of a threat to me. Not only that, but wait, not only that, but using the internet as a tool, the Daily Stormers of the world, they have utilized the internet as a tool. Against people like Tanya Gersh, who is, I don't know the exact specifics of the case because I read about it a long time ago, but I know that she did something with Richard Spencer's mom, and they claimed that it was something nefarious. They claimed that he was threatened, and so they decided to send her threatening mail, threatening packages, threatening phone calls, tweeted her son a picture of him in an oven. This is a ethno-fascist mafia mob-like movement that we have not seen the likes of ever of its kind, because of the advent of the internet and its methods to accelerate to power.
Okay, and you're right, that is horrendous. And I think their ideology and most of the people within that are promulgating this ideology are horrendous as well. In regards to what happened to Charlottesville, it's not clear where the violence came from and how it started, who started the violence. You know, the footage I've seen, you know, you see counter protesters blocking their way through the streets, and then you see some brawling take place. You can't really see who throws the first punch, and then there's also footage of Antifa protesters knocking down this one white nationalist who's walking down the street unprovoked. So it's not all too clear who started the violence there. You know, as much as I hate them, as much as I think they're disgusting, they do have the right to march through the street as long as they're not committing violence.
Absolutely.
And in regards to your anecdote about what were you saying exactly? I didn't completely understand exactly what happened. Are you saying they sent like a package to this woman?
Packages. They sent hundreds of voice messages on her on her answering machine. They sent threatening emails. They sent threatening tweets to her. They said they tweeted her son with a picture of him with an Xbox in an oven, telling him go in to get in the oven.
Yeah.
And they literally utilized the internet as a weapon of digital harassment, which led to this woman losing her job, which led to her losing her peace. They knew where she lived, obviously, right. And she has a children.
So that's crossed over to the point of online harassment, essentially. You know, we see that term thrown around a lot in terms of in these discussions, but that is literally, I think, the most prescient definition of internet harassment right there. And you know, but unless there are a lot of examples of that happening, I'm not completely convinced that they're as dangerous as, say, Antifa. I don't see that many white supremacists going to left-wing events and and starting fights, rioting, trying to stop people from speaking.
Right. Okay. Let's make a distinction between white supremacists and ethnocentrists and ethno-nationalists and ethno-fascists, okay? A white supremacist is someone who believes in the inherent superiority of the white race. An ethno-nationalist, ethnocentrist, ethno-fascist, whatever last time I made it myself, they essentially believe in the supremacy of their ethnicity, whether that be inherently white, with the alt-right is inherently white, European ethnicity. So there's an important distinction to be made there. And to say, well, I just don't see those ethnocentrists or those ethno-nationalists arriving to rallies in masks and bandanas and threatening people with violence, therefore they're not an issue, would be kind of similar to my antidote. Because, as I said, the alt-right mostly has a digital presence. They mostly have a digital presence, but we've seen when this digital presence manifests into the real material world, you get events like Unite the Right. Unite the Right was probably the first major launch event for the alt-right to really protest and have this counterculture-esque demonstration of how they are the identitarian movement, how they are the white race, and how they are going to kick out anyone else who is not looking like them. Now, granted, there were examples of that during when the Robert Lee Ely statue in Virginia was being taken down. Richard Spencer led a torchlight rally saying, right next to the statue, saying, you cannot destroy history or whatever. So yes, they have been around in certain minuscule portions, but this is the first debut into the material world. In reference to the Gersh incident, there is most certainly more examples, not exactly of that particular strain, but of similar strains. The alt-right has utilized memes. They have utilized doxing. They have utilized many other methods of harassment and online torture to silence their enemies. Literally. And I think that's not in dispute. We have countless examples of that, I think. I think to give you another example, you would have the incident with, I forgot what her name was. She was in the Ghostbusters movie and stuff. And Leslie Jones, I think her name.
Right.
Yeah, and Milo made a few tweets towards her that weren't really that bad. But then the alt-right followers on Twitter decided to harass her, and they leaked her nude photos from her iCloud, hacked into it and everything.
Right.
Essentially. What?
Were those really alt-righters? Because
oh yes.
What if the far left just misrepresented them with alt-righters, rather than that could have been anyone who disagree with the progressives?
Oh, well, here's my answer to that. Very simple. Milo was at that time seen as an alt-right sort of figurehead, and it would logically follow to me that many of his followers who were retorting or sharing alt-right memes and shouting racist slurs towards Leslie Jones would not necessarily be left-wingers in disguise that are strategically trying to make the alt-right look bad, even though they did a good enough job of that themselves. I genuinely think, due to the person who had sent them there, that they were genuinely alt-righters. Even if they may not have been genuinely racist, they were still a part of the alt-right because of the shepherd, so who herded them towards her, right? So I think it will logically follow. No, look, I'm surmising this. I have no actual hardcore evidence that every single person who sent this tweet or who hacked her was an alt-righter. But it logically follows, if the shepherd of the alt-right leads his sheep towards a certain person and they go rabid and they attack, it kind of follows that it would probably be alt-right people.
I think what he was saying was that was the left misrepresenting them in terms of, because this is a common tactic they use. They label pretty much everyone that disagrees with them as alt-right, whether they are or not. So I think what Louis was saying was that, were they really alt-right, or
yes,
was the left not that they were leftists in disguise trying to make the alt-right.
Oh, okay. I get this point now. So he's saying is that the media narrative portrayed them as something they weren't. The very simple answer to that is no. You could just look at their tweets. You can see the kind of content, the nature of the person they pretend to be on the internet, of course, because I'm not entirely sure that's how they act in real life. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's not how they act in real life. But the persona they conveyed through the internet, you can just look at that and you can see what the content of it is and where their allegiances lie. And I think, even as I said, Milo is the reason why they attacked Leslie Jones in the first place. Before Milo, she was not getting all these harassed. Okay, I'm sure she's probably getting a few, but she was not getting to the volume that I'm describing. Harassing or threatening tweets. She did not get her icon hacked before Milo came in and began giving her publicity. So I think it logically follows that the alt-right had something to do with that. Wouldn't you agree?
Me?
Well, both. Either of you.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't blame Milo completely for.
I'm not blaming him. I'm saying that he just herded his sheep. See, if a shepherd is herding his sheep, he's just walking, and the sheep are following him in a single file line. And he's not saying anything. He's not saying stop. He's not saying come with me. He's just walking.
Sure.
The sheep stop.
Yeah, they follow his presence. I understand.
Yeah, he points his rod towards them.
Sure.
They go after some. I'm not saying that he. I think Leslie Jones took it all except her getting hacked and her photos getting leaked, because that was an absolute breach of privacy. That's disgusting. Yeah. I think she let it get to her head a bit.
Sure.
But again, this is an example of an alt-right harassment, harassment of town. And the reason they are so dangerous, in my opinion, the reason they are such a deadly force, because they are able to utilize the internet like any other time. And with our digitally and interconnected world, with almost everything and almost many things being relied on the internet, to hydroelectric facilities, to records, et cetera, in the wrong hands, that can be wielded as a club against your political opponents. That is why the alt-right is dangerous. And that is why they're growing, because the internet is also prevalent amongst my generation. I'm 17. They are prevalent amongst my generation. And with the memes and with the jokes and stuff, they are enticing feeble-minded teenagers or feeble-minded young adults, or even young adults that have this sense of, I'm a white person. I don't feel like I am, being treated right. I don't feel like the media is blaming me for everything. And, when you have Netflix putting out this stuff, and you have all these outlets putting out this stuff that is basically denigrating to white men for no reason other than their skin color, which is despicable, you will have that sort of passion aroused in their spirit that will make them want to go and utilize it in a greater movement. So I think the alt-right is dangerous for many reasons, but their presence on the internet is one of the most powerful reasons, I would say.
Guys, check the chat within the live stream, not the viewer chat, the chat within the stream. Is it working to you guys?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
You see my words? Okay, then. Moral Philosopher, you said you're 17, right?
Yes.
I'm 21, and my sister's turning 17 in about a few months, and she is not that bright.
Okay. Don't mention that. No. I have a passion for this stuff, and I'm pursuing this stuff because I understand it. But look, I have a very limited presence. I have 14 subscribers. If I don't speak up against it, if I don't go out on the line, because something could happen, they could dox. I understand. If I don't speak up against it, then literally there are not many people who will. Shapiro has, thankfully. Marco Rubio has called him out. I don't even like Marco Rubio. Orrin Hatch, who is the chairman of a Senate committee, Senator of Ohio from Utah, has called them out. These people have called them out, thankfully. But when the president of the United States blatantly kowtows to these people, and when David Duke tweets out, "Thank you, Mr. President, thank you for recognizing where the real violence was," that gravely concerns me.
Yeah, I think you're completely right about that. I think the rise of the alt-right's prominence is due to two things. One, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, is the left's push towards identity politics and this ludicrous anti-white attitude that's so prevalent in our culture nowadays. This idea that somehow, if you don't want to see the evil effects of white identity politics, then you cannot start promulgating identity politics for every other group and turning every group against one another and forsaking the philosophy of individualism and not expect it to bite you in the back.
Absolutely.
That's one aspect of the cause of the alt-right. The other aspect of it, would be, I would say, sort of not exactly whitewashing, but this idea promulgated by people like Trump, Steve Bannon, and a lot of other people who identified as alt-right as a way to distinguish themselves from the mainstream right. Not in the sense that they were actually alt-right, but in the sense that they wanted to identify as sort of the Trumpian proto-nationalist right. People like Cernovich, people like Milo, who aren't actually alt-right in the proper sense. But I think they did their cause a great disservice by giving these people a platform and giving them some sense of legitimacy. People like Spencer, people like Vox, people like Jared Taylor, whether it was directly or indirectly. And I think, that was definitely a huge mistake on their end.
Oh, undoubtedly. See, the thing about Trump is, I think he's a political neophyte. Trump is a political neophyte who is utilizing his skills from the business world and attempting to transfer them into the political world. And it's obviously not turning out very good. I mean, we don't have to get into his presidency because that's not the topic, but still, it's gone terrible. Almost a majority of his staff. Anthony Scaramucci spent less than a week, the shortest-lived White House communications director, and was fired. Trump loves to fire people. That was his brand. He said, "I will fire people." I love to say you're fired. That was his slogan. But he obviously cannot manage the government very well because of this, I would say, because of his shoot from the hip, take questions later kind of strategy. But I say that to say this. Donald Trump is not an ideologue, I don't think. He is what he perceives to be a patriot. He is what he perceives to be a strong man, a true incarnation of what an American should be. He is what he perceives to be the person who is going to make America great again. As he said in the RNC speech in 2016 in Cleveland, by myself. He didn't say those exact words, but he said those similar words. So that is where a lot of this lack of denouncing, a lot of this lack of vicious pursuing of the alt-right is coming from. He just probably isn't very invested in it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I saw an interesting bit of back and forth between Jonah Goldberg and Hugh Hewitt, two conservative commentators. Basically, Jonah was saying that, and this, I'm not saying that this is the definite truth, but it was an interesting insight into a possible way in which Trump thinks about his base. He's not a racist, and he doesn't want to support racists, but it was almost as if that he almost thought of the majority of conservatives and Republicans as racist, or sort of he had this sort of bigotry of low expectations towards the conservative base, and thought the only way to win their support was to entertain and not offend this alt-right white nationalist base that he has, as if it was somehow the majority of the conservative base, which is nonsense. And I think that just displays his ignorance, and which would bring me to the second possibility, which is he's just ignorant of the alt-right. He just doesn't really pay attention to a lot of these
events.
Yes, exactly.
And mulling that possibility, I would say even ignorance I wouldn't even give it an excuse. Not an excuse. He's very active on social media, as obvious. I mean, I'm sure he's able to download the YouTube app, press through it a few times, look up Antifa, look up some other term, and he's able to look at what they've done. I mean, there's thousands of videos. And he could even retweet one out and say, look at this. He has the ability to really shine a light on a bunch of this stuff and to really denounce it powerfully, because he utilizes social media, something that many other presidents, even before him, Barack Obama utilized social media, but it wasn't to this extent. It was just a staff-ran Twitter page. Really, so Trump has utilized the internet as a blowtorch against the media narrative, right? And that's what makes him, I think, so threatening, and I think what makes him so vulnerable. Threatening because a lot of CNN's ratings are at all-time low. I mean, corporate news in general, the ratings are not doing Fox News is faring very well, but many others are falling. And the alternative media readerships, their views, their likes, all that, it is rising. Drudge, Breitbart, all these other alternative sources are rising with popularity of the internet. And the president is riding on the back of this soaring popularity in the alternative media. That's what makes him threatening to them. What makes him vulnerable is that he does not know when to shut up. He does not know when to be tempered. He does not know when to say things the right way.
Oh,
That is what makes Twitter, in my opinion, so dangerous for him.
absolutely. He shoots himself in the foot almost daily, using that Twitter account. And I think if someone needs to just grab him and just say, get off the Twitter, Donald. Let's just focus on real issues, such as tax reform or literally anything else. And we can focus on social media presence at another time, or maybe not even at all.
Wouldn't it be great if he just abolished all taxes and maybe I would hesitantly say this institute of flat tax? Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
But that's not going.
That's not going
to happen.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen, sadly, because he is probably not interested in that. Anyway, yeah, that's all I'd say about that. Lewis, are you there?
Yes. Now then, well, moving on to a different subject. Wait, on the topic of Trump. Well, back when he was starting to rise, back in late 2015. Well, I had different views back then. It was rather, I was somewhat of a libertarian by then, as I was starting to move to the right, but Trump's rhetoric at the time seems to be surprisingly shocking to me, even though I was already desensitizing myself from the far left and to any racist slur. But the fact that what Trump said in his rhetoric somewhat shocked me. The fact that he was able to overcome the progressives seems to be somewhat scary, even though compared to the alt-right, he is a very tame example. But the fact that we're starting to get more riots during his rise before he even got elected indicates that even the slightest differing opinion from the progressives will lead to a crap storm. And by the time he got elected, more riots happened. I'm not even sure what would happen if someone from the alt-right, could be anyone, ends up running for president, and Trump is not even in the alt-right. I'm not even sure what part of the compass he is, but he seems rather leftist for a Republican.
Yeah, he's center-left moderate.
Oh, goodness.
Although I wouldn't call him a neoconservative in most of his views.
Okay, here's what Trump is a Brandis. That's what he's a Brandis. Whatever is going to sell his product is what he's going to do. He is that is the primary rule of the market. That is the primary rule of business. Whatever sells your product, if it's legal, of course, do it. He saw something in the Republican Party. He saw that his old friend Hillary was running, probably was going to run, and that he saw, you know what? I've been mulling running president for years upon years upon years. Why don't I just do it? And he ran. And all this stuff that was a derivative of him running, the alt-right, he was probably not expecting that. He was not expecting all these groups to rise up. But I think, in part, their acceleration, their ascension to prominence, not their creation, because their creation was done in far before him. The ascension to prominence was done because of the media. Funnily enough, if the media had not branded Trump's introductory speech in the lobby of Trump Tower, where he called a select few of Mexicans rapists and criminals, after clearly pointing out to the Mexicans that were literally above him, saying that you're not that, you're not that. If they had not construed that, or they didn't construe it, if they had not said that as him saying all Mexicans are criminals and rapists, I don't think you would have seen such a strong reaction on the left from people who are clearly don't like that stuff. I don't think most people like that stuff. Or from the right, where people in the alt-right would sympathize with that kind of thing. So it's all in the media narrative. I think that has given these people the rise to prominence. As Ben Shapiro pointed out, if the media hadn't paid so much attention to the alt-right, it is very likely they'd be nowhere near the level of prominence they are right now. But I would also add to that, or even a little bit contort that a bit, that the internet is more powerful than the media at the moment. And I think with Donald Trump, you've seen a mobilization of political faction on the internet more than ever before. And I think that they still would have gotten to prominence, but it would have been at a much more glacial pace than it has been recently.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. If the media would not highlight these people so much, they wouldn't have as much prominence as they do now. That's why this is part of the reason why I don't see the alt-right and white nationalists as this massive national security threat. They could be a street threat, and I'm not diminishing what you were talking about their online presence and their harassment campaigns, but I really don't see any evidence for if Antifa and other counter-protesters had not shown up, if they had just let them march through the streets and do their stupid little "you will not replace us" blood and soil bullshit, then I don't think that woman or other people would have gotten hurt. I honestly don't. I mean, what has the KKK done in the last 20 years nationwide? Do they really have the same presence that they had in the 1960s?
The 60s, well, you have to understand, the Klan, in its most powerful organization, was the first Klan. It came from Pulaski. That had, control of the southern judges, southern legislators, all that. That was the most powerful incarnation. Even the second Klan, where they had 1 million Klan white man march in Washington, D.C. in 1920, that still didn't amount to a significant amount of regional, I would say, political influence, albeit I do think that there was a president. I think Woodrow Wilson, or one of the presidents, or Calvin Coolidge, one of them sympathized with KKK.
Oh, no, it was Wilson.
Okay, Wilson.
He was the one who played Birth of a Nation in the White House.
Yes, okay, thank you. I was getting fogged on that. So, They haven't really, I would say, 1871, 1872, when the Enforcement Acts were passed, and President Grant signed laws, and President Grant suspended habeas corpus and sent the federal troops into South Carolina, where they arrested and took down dens of Klansmen. I think that was probably the end of the Klan's significant political prowess. Now, derivative of the Klan ideology, segregationism, and et cetera, using state-sanctioned, status-enforced segregation to impose a so-called white rule. We have people like George Wallace and other segregationists. Even one of my inspirations, William F. Buckley, who was at the beginning of his career, supported segregation, but then decided to eventually, retract that, because I don't think he genuinely thought it out. So, the Klan itself, as my point is, hasn't been politically powerful until their fall in the 1870s, I think. And after the death of the second Klan, when the FBI really got there and began doing operations, you began to see the Klan. You began to see them use this concept pinned by Dr. I forgot what his name was, Dr. William something, where it's called in his book, The Turner Diaries, where it's called Leaderless Resistance. You began to see the Klan have no central authority. They just split up, like White Knights Ku Klux Klan, the Confederate Knights Ku Klux Klan. They would just split up into certain different factions, so they couldn't be taken down. And since then, they've been a rudimentary force. So, my point is, they haven't had much power until the 1870s.
Right.
Now, neo-Nazis themselves haven't had much power ever, really. Look, I generally think that if the neo-Nazis had been more prominent in the 1940s and 1950s and the aftermath of World War II, you would have actually seen events similar to the Red Scare, to the McCarthy trials, exerted upon Nazis, because America didn't like Nazis, especially in that time. And I'm not thinking there would have been a peaceful Nazi protest anywhere in America after 1945. I just don't, even after America had gotten involved in the World War II. So they haven't been really active. But now they're starting to get active within the alt-right, which is why I'm so concerned. Right. Well, they've been active, but they haven't been as prominent, as I said.
Yeah, and my point is, they have no influence in politics whatsoever. I think the most we can expect for them to do is commit maybe a few violent crimes here and there, but I largely think the fear from so-called white extremism, which there's so many so-called studies put out about this that are totally unreliable because they conflate pretty much any crime committed by a white guy as either white right-wing extremism or white terrorism, white nationalism. But when you actually look at these studies, for example, the New America study, they basically include a bunch of crimes that either the motives aren't clearly stated, or they weren't political, they weren't conservative, and a few here and there are actual white nationalists. But I think the threat of somehow white supremacist, white nationalist violence is largely exaggerated by the media. Right. Not to say that I don't think that there are some very, very dangerous and mentally unstable people within the alt-right movement, and we definitely saw that in Charlottesville with, as evidence by a crime committed by James Alex Fields after he killed that woman. So, right. I would probably put them in the same category, honestly, as like the Bloods and the Crips.
I wouldn't, because the Bloods and the Crips used to have empires in the 80s running cocaine throughout both the East and West Coast. They used to be a major force. And the really white supremacists had not had that kind of power since the 1870s. That kind of... Actually, the Crips and the Bloods really didn't have a lot of institutional power, except occasional bribes given to politicians. White supremacists had institutional power. So in a sense...
They did, yeah.
The Klan was much greater in the 1870s, of course. This was back before the internet was even exist. Of course, was much greater than any modern street gang. They were kind of like the mafia, kind of.
Sure. Yeah, so I think we're largely in agreement here.
But yes, I do think that the media needs a scapegoat, and the media needs to, especially in this time of President Trump's presidency, they need a monster, so-called, to crucify. And that's the evil white supremacists that are going to kill us. I don't think it's not necessarily a major threat, but again, I said this to Esoteric Fan, who's one of my friends, and who is a major anarcho-capitalist YouTuber on YouTube. I said this: if you ignore evil for a long enough time, it is bound to rise and it is bound to materialize into a force that you have not the means or not the immediate means of handling. If you ignore evil for a good enough of time. And a lot of people dismissed the alt-right at first, except the media, who was claiming they were but they didn't even give them this much credit, in all honesty. Then this happened. Look, Spencer is going to be out. Cantler's going to be out. People are going to be out there in full force, especially from now on. David Duke, he hadn't had much relevance since he had fallen from the position of Imperial Wizard. He had written certain books where he argued for certain things relating to identity and stuff, but he has the potential to rise to be the foremost intellectual of the alt-right kind of movement. He's already one of the foremost intellectuals of the white supremacist movement, unofficially, of course, because they aren't really organized, as I said before. They learned not to do that. So that's my concern. Because David Duke, I'll say this: I despise the man personally. I despise his ideology. I despise everything he stands for. But notwithstanding that, he is a very intelligent man who is capable of arguing his points with a sort of efficiency that I have not seen from even the people on the alt-right that I have debated. And that's saying something, because the people I've debated have immense proficiency in their craft. They know every single aspect of their ideology. They can back it up with pseudoscientific evidence that seems real on its face. He is a bit more advanced than that. And that's scary. And if you want evidence for that, look at his debate with Alex Jones. Now, Alex Jones is not a very masterful debater. He is a pundit that screams in the microphone about the frogs being gay and about all this other bullshit. Excuse my language, all this other nonsense.
He's a meme.
Essentially.
You realize the gay frogs can be applied to the French people voting for Macron.
Yes,
You're French, Louis, right?
As in what?
Well, is your nationality French, or are you?
No, I'm American.
Really? Oh.
Yes, I live somewhere in the Midwest. Near the Great Lakes.
Ah, beautiful place.
Um,
Anyway,
sorry, we can continue.
yes. About Alex Jones. I'm sorry. I'll give it back to you in a moment, Babylon or Lewis. About Alex Jones. I'll admit this, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this because probably going to use it against me in the future. When I was younger, like 11, 12, 13, I actually used to listen to Alex Jones. I had a friend that had a subscription to PrisonPlanet.tv. And I would log on. I still remember the password and the details today, because I leased the phone. But I would log on, and I would watch, because he had a program we could have the 5 people on your plan, and they could watch on your plan. So I would log on and watch his show almost every day. And I had watched his rants, like the hell is coming rant, where he literally pretends to be a New World Order agent, acting out, telling his plan how to destroy people by fondling their daughters and making men effeminate and putting dysphenol A in the plastic and all this other stuff. He literally takes on this gritty voice and me to say, yeah, let's break their will. I've seen the rant where he literally smashes his chest like a gorilla and screams. The one where he's talking about Bill Gates being a chicken neck Nelly. The one where he's talking about, Obama smelling like sulfur and Hillary smelling like sulfur, beating demons from the pits of the underworld. I used to be very into this guy. But then something called common sense and rationality hit me in my face. And I said, okay, why am I actually listening to this? One of the main things about me and Alex Jones, he had supported Ron Paul back in 2011, 2012. And that was my kind of introduction into libertarian politics, libertarian ideology, libertarian thought. I loved and I still love Ron Paul to this day. I think he is one of the foremost purveyors of libertarian. I think he is one of the only true by being defined as adhering to constitutional principles as intended by our founders. Politicians in Washington. He was one of the true politicians in Washington because of how strictly constitutional most of his voting record was. Some of it wasn't, but most of it was. And so I was so inspired. And Alex Jones kind of just rode this wave of libertarianism. Which is funny now, because now he's flirting with the alt-right. And he's flirting with all these other people. But he kind of just rode this wave of libertarianism. And that's what enticed me. And what's enticed me with Alex Jones right now, because you have a lot of people around my age who have never heard of the man, who's just getting involved in politics that Donald Trump is cool, or the memes are nice and funny. And they're looking at this man and saying, oh my God, I love him, without really understanding the damage that this man does. Bisphenol A in the plastic, fluoride going to kill us all, gay frogs, effeminate men. He literally made a rant about how nerds are so evil because they're going to take over the world because they're bullied. Like, I'm not that evil, and I consider myself to be. I'm not that evil, But he literally made a rant against nerds, for goodness sakes. This is a man who has absolutely no credibility. Yet people on the right, especially libertarians, love this guy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Royal Philosopher.
Yes.
What political ideology do you really have? You said yourself you're a libertarian, right?
Okay, in what sense political ideology? In the strictly American terms, in a more universal sense, in what sense? Because there's certain terms I would use. For strictly American political terms, I would consider myself a right-wing libertarian. Most of my right-wing tendencies are restricted to physical matters, thankfully, thank God. Because I wouldn't be able. But on abortion, I am pro-life, except for these 3 exceptions, actually. And gun rights, I am in full throttle support of the Second Amendment. Those are probably the 2 main positions where I am a socially rightist. On sexual liberation, on homosexuality, on marriage, on all of that, on tradition, on gender roles, I am a full-fledged, leave me alone, I'm so scared of you, liberal. I support sexual liberation. I support people joining in consensual pacts to do as they please in their own and their own doing without society trying to punish them for it. I support a breaking away from traditional norms and traditional values and actually having dynamism in society. I'm not saying traditional values are inherently wrong. I'm saying to have them and to have only them and to have them instituted by the government onto the populace as a whole is a bad thing. I think dynamism and time that dynamic tends to create more ideas that tend to be better, right? If we had stayed with traditionalism during the colonial times, we would not have revolted. If we had stayed with traditionalism during the time of slavery, we would not have an abolition movement. If we had stayed with traditionalism during the time of the prohibition, we would never have repealed the. I'm not going to say. I think I know the name of the amendment, but I'm not going to embarrass myself. That amendment. We would not have repealed it. If we had stayed with traditionalism during the time in the 60s, we would not at the moment have a time where gays and lesbians can walk around the street and not be killed or not be hurt, or we don't have a time where there's not public propaganda on TVs literally telling men that all homosexuals are pedophiles. If we had stuck with traditional norms, we would not have a free country. That is my problem with traditionalism. Or specifically the application of traditionalism used by conservatives like Mike Pence or Mike Huckabee, or these people who I used to admire before I realized, hey, they're kind of crazy. So that's on those issues, I am a complete liberal. But on other issues that kind of matter more to me, because I think the government has no involvement in any of these matters, at all, I am more of a rightist, I would say.
Does that include supporting private health care?
Oh, yes. Oh, I think, and this is a very radical view. I actually read an essay about this, I think, 8th grade. I think all welfare should be abolished, gradually, of course. And I think that the government should get out of education. We should abolish the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Department of EPA. We should abolish a lot of these departments, in my opinion, because the government has no business attempting to save us from ourselves, attempting to dictate, so to speak, their version of morality upon us, attempting to tell us what we need to focus on, when in all reality, the market would Here's an example of this. During 2009 and 2010, the Obama administration decided to fund 2 startups for green energy, Solyndra and Solar Trust. Now, of course, after not too long, since there was not a market for those issues, those 2 endeavors absolutely failed. It was one of the most embarrassing moments of Obama's presidency. And I wonder if we had left that matter of green energy and all that to the market, because there's a market for solar panels. Trust me, there is. With all these doomsday purposes, there's a market for it. Even for fuel efficiency, there's a market for it. If we had left it to the free market, it would have been much better disseminated, and it probably wouldn't have failed as quickly as it had. Because right now, solar wind turbines, aren't necessarily in wide dissemination. So my issue is the government is getting involved in issues that they had no business getting involved in. For example, I'm not trying to go on a tangent here, but I've recently finished The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and he essentially says the purpose of government is the collective defense of the 3 faculties: the life, property, and the individual. Right? Those things. If the government, and he also said that if the government stayed in its proper place, we would all have an equal interest in the law. You wouldn't have a bunch of these ideologues running from office. We wouldn't have a bunch of these, people trying to advance the political causes through the mechanism of government. You would have an equal interest. And I think that basically sums up my ideology. I think a bit further, though. I personally think that matters of social justice should absolutely not be legislated by the courts or the government. I think social justice should remain social and not governmental, or else it's not really social justice. It's government pushing an agenda, which the only agenda the government has any business pushing, it is what is clearly enshrined in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the parameters around that, which are enshrined in the words of our founders in Federalist 48, or in the words of Thomas Jefferson, or in the words of our Constitution, even though I believe some parts of our Constitution, like the income tax, need to be repealed. But you get my point. So yes, I support private. In short, I support private healthcare. Yes.
Okay, Babylon thought. Are any of Royal Philosopher's views very similar to your own?
Yeah, I would say a lot of them are. I would consider myself a libertarian. Both, I consider myself a libertarian and a conservative simultaneously, sort of part of the fusionist variety as laid out by conservative intellectual Frank Meyer early in the mid 20th century, or as some people like Charles Koch from National Review have coined it, as a conservatarian. So I would say I'm very liberal on social issues, as Philosopher is, a royal philosopher that is, sorry. But I'm a little more, I'm a little more skeptical about the abandonment of traditional values, more so than royal philosopher is. And we can talk about that at some point, perhaps. But
I would love to.
Sure. And but essentially, yeah, I would say we agree on most things. I'm an economic libertarian. I'm definitely more hawkish when it comes to foreign policy than most libertarians are. And you could also say I have some objectivist leanings as well. Definitely very fond of Rand. But,
oh my!
And
Ayn Rand or Rand Paul?
Both, but I was referring to Ayn Rand.
Yeah, she's the mother of objectivist thought.
Sure, not a full-flung objectivist, obviously, but some sympathies.
I hope not.
Here. So yeah, I would say we agree on most things, and probably disagree on some minor things.
Yeah, and I would love to have a separate conversation with you about traditionalism and the Roman society, because I think that's a very important discussion to have.
Sure.
Okay, then. I think here comes a dark truth. One of the many dark truths of why the alt-right is rising. But first, I need to go on that, I was once a libertarian back in late 2015, but I am now somewhat of a fusionist and somewhat support traditionalist values. And this is somehow a very long story. It's not too personal, though. Back in late 2015, I usually call myself a libertarian, and I was originally subscribed to a user named Scotty M. And do you know who he is, either of you?
I'm not familiar, no.
Well, apparently. Okay, and do either of you know Rocking Mr. E?
I'm not familiar.
No.
Well, both of them call themselves as libertarians, but when I look at their views pragmatically, it turns out Scotty M's version of libertarianism is extremely flawed, and it took a while to figure out the flaws. I had an intuition on why Scotty's view of libertarianism seemed flawed, but I only had an intuition, and that was when he made a question and response. I don't know how to describe it. He made a video about Donald Trump, and he doesn't support him. He considers him as a stepping stone. But when and I left him a question about him regarding that I don't support Trump, and I did make a reference to Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. The question itself is irrelevant in this case. When other questions came through in his response video and he responded, I noticed something very weird, as if he seems to be a little bit brainwashed, but at the time it was only a feeling of intuition. I didn't know how to I didn't know the answer at the time. I had a bad feeling. And then a few weeks later, an argument between Scotty and Rocking Mr. E came out, and Rocking Mr. E condemned Scotty for being a so-called lolbertarian. Do you even know what is that term, either of you?
I mean, I've heard it, but I mean, is it sort of a? I'm guessing it's used in mockery of libertarians.
Oh, of course. You're basically affixing a meme on the term libertarian and
Sure.
saying, yeah, you're not really a libertarian, you're just making a joke of it. But I would like to actually use this to talk a little bit about what I was talking to you about in the chat, Lewis, about YouTube intellectuals. May I talk a little bit about that?
Yes, although
Okay.
I might need to go on with my story.
All right, I'll be very brief.
Okay.
A reason why I'm incredibly aversive to getting involved into the youth skeptic community is for a few reasons. Number one, I notice that a lot of them are narcissists and arrogant assholes, and I don't tend to like that very much. Yeah, a lot of them think because they use big words. Trust me, I use foul language sometimes, but I don't use it on purpose because it just comes natural to me in some instances because I read a lot of material. Not because I'm so smart or anything like that. But when they use big words and they misuse the words to make themselves sound like they're William F. Buckley's, offspring, that just makes me shake my head. Like, what? Who are you trying to impress? That's one thing. Number two, it is merely a fact. Unless you are incredibly well-read and well-studied, not even Sergeant of a Cod is well-read and well-studied, for goodness sakes. Unless you are incredibly, your status will not elevate beyond that of a blogger or an armchair philosopher who is pontificating about matters he knows nothing about. I am very good to avoid matters I know nothing about. I know very little about Social Security, which is why I refuse. So when anyone asks me a question about it, I refuse to answer. My intuition is that it shouldn't be there, but I wouldn't be able to justify that in an argument. Therefore, I just don't talk about it. These armchair YouTube intellectuals, they'll talk about it all day. And they'll often make claims with no justification or poor justification in which their claims fall short. Doesn't mean their claims are untrue, but it means that their claims will fall short. I don't think that my work is going to be done on YouTube. But I think because discussions like this are important to have, because I also understand the importance of the digital era. That's all.
So that's it then, Royal Philosopher?
Yes.
Okay. As I go on, well, when Rocking Mr. E made the response, at the time I couldn't understand what we were talking about, but I soon found out a flaw with Scotty's version. He doesn't take account to culture. Scotty is completely for free market, but he neglects a cultural part within the ideology. He's a market anarchist. Do you know what is that?
Oh, of course I do. I'm friends with many anarcho-capitalists. I'll classify them as market anarchists. I forgot anarcho-capitalists. They support outsourcing every single duty of the government to the free market, every single one. And look, I love anarcho-capitalists, but I think they are a bit silly. But not because of the reasons you're saying. I'll let you finish before I completely respond.
Okay, what about you, Babylon? Do you know that term, a market anarchist?
I mean, I think I'm not sure if there's a I've heard some anarcho-capitalists make a distinction between market anarchists and anarcho-capitalists. I'm not sure. I'm not clear on the extent of that distinction, or if there even is one. But I have heard the term.
Okay, then the reason Rocking Mr. E condemned Scotty was because Scotty supported market anarchism. I mean, I was never an anarchist in the first place, even back when I was a libertarian. But I soon realized, but I nearly fell into a trap, especially when Scotty was somewhat open-minded with open borders, and Mr. E condemned him for that because it doesn't take account to culture. even if the welfare state is gone, it won't stop attracting people who end up abusing other cultures.
Ah.
So what you're saying, Lewis, is that
It's
you're
pronounced
opposed to sort of open borders libertarianism. Is what you're saying.
Yes.
I think you're more of a cultural preservationist than anything. May I ask a question, please, Lewis? I'm curious. I'm actually
What is it?
genuinely curious about something. And as I told you a few moments ago, traditionalism and cultural preservation are not necessarily my things in many cases. But I'm curious. Culture insofar as what? Culture insofar as the dictates of the American Constitution that have influenced our justice system, that has influenced our society for 200 plus years of our existence of the Republic, or culture insofar as social institutions that have been instituted by society, like gender roles or marriage, et cetera, that have become tools of the government to get power and to endeavor into social engineering. Our culture insofar as that which is well, actually, those are only the two classes of culture, really. So tell me, what class of culture are you referring to? So then we can have a productive conversation about this.
That would be both. Have
But,
ever heard of the phrase "politics is downstream from culture"? Now,
No, I haven't.
Let me be clear with this. First of all, I'm not an ethno-nationalist, and
I know
this is
that.
obvious from the fact that I don't even agree with the alt-right, and I don't want the movement to grow too great. But at the same
Right.
time, I'm not a civic nationalist either, and that's only because one of my subscribers by the name of Virgilius Rex told me and informed with his subscribers through a video that saying ethno-nationalist or civic nationalist or any other qualifier to the word nationalist or nationalism is actually fallacious, and someone should be using just the word nationalist or nationalism followed by a clause afterwards to qualify the word nationalist, such as being both liberal and a nationalist, or an ethnocentric and a nationalist. The problem is that, how do I describe this? The problem is I'm not even sure what kind of nationalist I am because it's a Morton's fork. I'm damned if I choose one of them, and I'm damned if I don't, or the other, maybe. So it's already fallacious to qualify the word nationalism with something before it.
Okay.
At least that's what Virgilius Rex said.
Well,
check out his content.
Well, if Virgilius Rex is by any chance watching this, I'm not sure how big of a YouTuber. I've never even heard of this guy.
He's a very small channel so far.
Oh, okay.
He has about half of my subscribers.
Oh, that's good for me then. So if Virgilius Rex is talking about this, I would love to have an entire debate with him on nationalism and its epidemiology and how there can be different strains of nationalism and how they have actually materialized in history. I would love that. I would love that. That would actually be nice. So if he's watching, I would love to have that. Just contact me, messages. I would love to have that. But so about your culture thing, because I think the culture thing is more important than the nationalism thing, in my opinion. I don't know, man. I think that preserving the cultural dictates, not even dictates, the cultural guidelines or so, not God, preserving the language of the Constitution, I'll say that, is very important and a very important aspect of American culture. Undoubtedly, 100%, no doubt, 100%. However, preserving the institutions that individuals have established is A, not the responsibility of government, and B, is often going to fail if there is a time in which those institutions are no longer able to put up with how far progress has accelerated. For example, the institution of marriage was once thought to be something conceived in it's not. First of all, let me make this clear. Marriage has never truly been, traditionally, one man, one woman. If we want to talk about traditions, and not just linear traditions, because I understand when people say traditional marriage, we support traditional marriage. Really? So you support polygamy then? Polyamory? Because they were traditional in different cultures. They were, and the thing about traditional marriage, it emerges from a linear point of Judeo-Christian spew, essentially. And I'm not saying that as an insult because I'm a Christian myself, but it emerges from a point of that. And that is my concern. When we say traditional marriage, we are not meaning a universal sense of traditional marriage. We are meaning traditional marriage in Judeo-Christian terms, and that is disingenuous. So if we want traditional marriage, bring in polygamy, bring in all of that, because that's what was traditional throughout multiple other cultures. At the same time that one man, one woman was also prevalent.
Okay, then. Well, the reason I said something about culture is because the story. Sorry, the story is getting too long, but when Rocking Mr. E said something about condemning market anarchists, and then when he said the phrase "politics is downstream from culture, not the other way around," I finally realized what he was talking about. Now, to be clear, I think I misspoke when I said something about December. The story actually started as early as October, but I finally realized what Mr. E meant with his condemnation with market anarchists, and that libertarians are also supposed to be accounting for culture. And this is something that neither we would expect from. Now, and I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Wait, how does this sharing the screen work? Okay. And is the screen showing up?
Aye.
Can you see it? Is it anything different to you?
Yep.
Okay. Does it have many pictures?
Mm-hmm.
Aye.
Okay.
Exact.
Okay. This is from remember when I said Fritz Imperial earlier in the stream?
Yes.
Now, you need to know who is he. He has over 2,700 subscribers, and this is not any other YouTube intellectual. He's not even a skeptic. He's actually a Christian traditionalist, and I actually like his content. I'd
love to debate him.
What?
I'd love to debate him. Go on. I'm sorry.
Who said that?
I did.
You, Royal Philosopher?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. He mainly started his channel for one single reason, maybe, and it was to criticize the skeptic community and their flaws. Now, the one video that actually changed my mind and made an impact to me was this: The Cause of Culture, a response to Kraut and Tea. Do you know who's Kraut and Tea?
Not familiar.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his.
Well, around November and early December, Kraut made a video titled "Culture is Not My Cause," and Fritz responded to him by saying that his entire video was very flawed because Kraut has an ideological lens in which it always focuses on what Kraut calls it. Let's see, freedom, liberty, and democracy, which Fritz points out to be very vague and not solid to be founded upon. Not only that, the alt-right actually called Kraut a cuck for making that very fallacious video. And that's when Fritz said politics is downstream from culture, and that in reality, as Fritz said, societies were never founded by politics for society's sake, only by their culture and supporters of culture such as religion, which is much more solid than freedom and democracy, and that liberalism can only be grown and melded to a culture only slowly and organically over time, which is why Kraut's video was very criticized. In fact, I once agreed with Kraut in the video, but I did have a small disagreement. And I later found out the flaws within Kraut's video. It actually changed my perception on libertarianism also, which drove me further into the right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, what is it?
So, I've not listened to Crouch and T, whatever his name is. But from what you've described, I already love the guy. And if the arguments that you described are the arguments of Fritz Imperial, whatever the heck his name is, then I don't think people in YouTube or anywhere, a lot of people on the internet major in critical thinking. Because I'm not going to try to attack Fritz's arguments. I don't know the exact content of them, but if what you were describing is true, then he is completely ignoring the theoretical possibility in the realm of culture. That there could be a culture predicated upon the auspices of a liberal thought. There could be one that it has originated as such. Now, I don't really think there has been in the history of the world, but in the theoretical realm of culture, it most possibly could be. And to say that liberalism is something that's attached organically organically would be attached, but artificially under a culture, is absolutely ridiculous. Because I think it depends on the culture. You can't just say liberalism is attached to all cultures artificially. That's ridiculous. I would say in the case of the United States, most definitely, liberalism was not attached artificially. It was ingrown. The mere fact that we wanted to rebel against the British Empire's rule was an ingrown example of liberalism. I mean, liberalism literally translates to liberalis in Latin, which means freedom. And it also translates in its later translations, like classical liberal, as as meaning things that are related to free, like free markets, a government that's smaller, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially, it also translates into being, as David Bowie said, fighting against the strain, going against the strain, not conforming to societal norms, being quote unquote liberal. That's essentially all the definitions of it, most of them at least.
Mm.
And these things are ingrown, I would say, at least in America. I've given multiple examples of that. I've given the abolition movement. I've given the Congress of America itself. I've given the multiple things. These are ingrown. I'll give a less desirable example because I don't like the example very much, but I'll give the progressive movement, in which many businesses were regulated heavily by the Roosevelts, Theodore Roosevelt, I believe, and the government began to encroach upon the free market. It was still kind of sort of a kind of liberal thing in a sense, only because the connotation of the word had been applied to that situation, not because of the negative meaning. But it was still ingrown nonetheless. So I would love to debate with Fritz on this. I think this is why I don't play around with YouTube intellectuals. I cannot take them seriously. It does not take a lot of thought to dissect the intellectuals I have a respect for on YouTube. I would say, I forgot what his name was, Martian something. The guy you told me about yesterday. I have respect for him because he actually has good arguments. I have respect for Mr. Dapperton. I'm not sure you guys know that. I have respect for him to a certain extent.
I'm a fan of him.
I know who Mr. Dapperton is. I don't actually agree with his anarcho-capitalist views.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that later, but anarcho-capitalism is ridiculous. But I have respect for him because he articulates his views well. There are people on YouTube I have respect for, but this wider community of YouTube intellectuals are ridiculous. They are ridiculous. I'd rather be in the pool with Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman and Ben Shapiro and Hugh Hewitt and Brent Bozell. I'd rather be with people who actually do stuff and actually make arguments that make sense, as opposed to people who sit in their armchair all day and think about things they know nothing about. That's all.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a very interesting discussion, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to get off, though, right now, though. But, hey, Royal Philosopher, was really cool talking to you, as well as Luis. And Royal Philosopher, I will PM you about about doing a stream sometime
Absolutely.
in the future. We can discuss some of these topics in more detail.
Thank you, man. I would love it.
Of course. Awesome. All right. So thanks a lot, Luis, for inviting me to the stream.
I was about to show you something else Babylon thought, but I guess you have to leave.
Sure. Well, you can private message me if you want, if that's possible. But if not, then maybe we can do this again and we can talk about it more.
Okay, then.
All right.
Are you running out of time, Royal Philosopher?
I have as much time as the world will give me, which is hopefully a long time.
Okay, then, because...
In fact, I would actually like to take this to now. I would like to see how many people are in the chat. Is this an active... Because I have not been looking at the chat the entire live stream.
Only two people are watching the stream for some reason, despite myself having 107 subscribers.
That's odd. Do you want... Is there anyone else you can bring on?
I have no idea, especially
you said that Martian or Marutan, whatever his name is, might be interested.
Mauritian Struggle.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, I think I found a problem with that. Mauritian Struggle lives in the UK, so it might be impossible to him to be invited.
Yeah.
There's someone else in the chat that claims, wait, what does he mean by he wants the link? Does he want to join the stream?
What's his name?
The 716 channel. I don't even know who he is.
I don't know who that guy is. Look at his channel real quick, because I have no idea who this guy is. Just look at the channel real quick and see what's going on there. Because I don't want a troll to come in and everything. Not saying you're a troll, man. I want to be cautious.
I'm not even sure who he is. I checked out his channel and I'm not even sure if he is able to be with us. Now, there's another user that's said by the name of Simon Petrikov.
And that is saying...
Simon Petrikov. Look in the chat.
Oh, I can't see that. I'm on mobile. I can't see that. But what is he saying?
Let's see. He said IDK, which means I don't know, which he is likely responding to my question from 808, which is, where is everyone? And he said that back on 812. Then there is, and then another comment from 812, which is, subscribe to him. Which, okay then. Oh, I guess I can't do anything with the 716 channel because that was from 819.
Oh. It's 9:06 where you are right now, right?
So there are only two of us in total. Okay. Now the story wasn't fully complete yet, and how is that relevant to the alt-right will become apparent, Royal Philosopher. Now,
yes.
The story, now, as I was saying with my personal story here, how do I describe this? Remember when I said about Fritz Imperial criticizing the skeptic community with the likes of Sargon and Kraut, along with the four horsemen of atheism? Or is it new atheism? I meant new atheism.
Okay, first.
And
wait.
I suggest you also check out The Distributist, who happens to be an acquaintance of Fritz.
Okay. Wait, hold on. You say new atheism.
Yes.
The new atheist movement was a movement that was started by actually real life intellectuals like Christopher Hitchens, Richard John Hawkins, real life people who are actually intellectual. I would not use their name in the same breath as people on YouTube that are atheists and that are pontificating their nonsense to the masses. Come on, because the actual new atheist movement in real life are their arguments are weak, but they are still intellectually reputable, somewhat, and they are respectable enough not to be mentioned the same by the YouTube. Just saying.
Well, I was about to say something about myself briefly admiring Hitchens until I found out he's a socialist.
Christopher Hitchens was a very brilliant man. He was a good talker. He was a good rhetorician. I think his thoughts were rather good too, but I don't agree with mostly anything he said.
Okay, then, because Fritz Imperial considers, also criticized Richard Dawkins for founding a cult in his video titled Richard Dawkins Founds a Cult.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins has this sort of cult of person, or had this sort of cult of personality around him amongst militant atheists. Right? Richard Dawkins was the go-to guy. And the thing is, Richard Dawkins is an incredibly poor debater. I would encourage you to look at his debate with John Lennox, the debate in Alabama and the debate in Oxford, I believe, in Cambridge. Both of those debates, objectively, Richard Dawkins failed on all the points. He failed on all the points. He failed miserably. John Lennox is an absolutely brilliant mathematician and brilliant Christian scholar who was a little sketchy in his reasoning. But Richard Dawkins absolutely, totally failed. So he has built this cult, but there is no reason the cult should exist because he is not that intellectually potent. Hitchens was.
Okay, then. I need to be very clear. I don't actually watch anything from the Four Horsemen because I basically didn't care. I knew they were influential, but I soon found their many flaws. And this was apparent by a few Christian traditionalists. Now, as I was saying regarding my story, okay, and this was later made. No, that's not right. Okay, and remember when I said that the video from Fritz actually changed my views on libertarianism?
Yeah.
Well, apparently, around a few weeks after the video, ever heard of that guy T?
I have, yes.
Now, that guy T released a video titled "White Nationalism is Scary," and
yes.
Apparently, when I was scrolling into the comments section, I found a very peculiar comment that made me somewhat curious, and that was from a user right here named Through the Smoke. He had a different name at the time, which was 8 months ago, and can you read anything right now?
It's very little, but you can read it to me. I can see it though.
Very little? You're using a cell phone, isn't it?
But still, you can read it to me. I can see it, of course. I can see what you're saying.
Okay. The first comment he said, libertarians reject human nature, and I was rather curious of why he said that, especially in that context. Then the next comment said, no, you're thinking of authoritarians. Can you read any of the comments shown?
Again, they are very minuscule on my screen.
Oh my. Okay, then he said, well, apparently if the text is too small, then apparently it's going to be very difficult for me to subscribe. But anyway, about a few comments late, well, he said that the reason libertarians reject human nature is because he then said, no, I'm not. Hierarchy is the natural order. Some egalitarian libertarian utopia is self-evidently not.
Oh,
okay. And then the next comment said, whatever you say, guy, with a... I'm not going to say the F word, so I'm going to say frickin'. Frickin' guy whipping a slave as his avatar. Well, that's because he had a different avatar at the time. Then Through the Smoke said, also the natural order, that person I'm talking about. Then the next comment said, which is random, I guess if you truly think National Socialism is the way to go. Next is arbitrary power via threat of force is not human nature. Libertarians aren't looking for utopia, just trying to avoid dystopia. And then he commented to someone whose name is irrelevant. Then through the smoke said, "Lol, libertarians reject human nature outright. We are a political animal, biological collectivists, a pack of apes, and people actually gravitate towards the worst aspects of our nature when their culture and community isn't reinforcing its virtues. The atomization that results from your libertarian garbage is the reason the West will fall." By the way, Roy Philosopher, I apologize if I stutter a lot. I have a slight speech impediment.
There's no man, it's no problem. You're doing good. You're doing good, man. You're fine.
Okay.
Never say you have a problem or anything like that. You are fine. You are doing good, and I understood everything you're saying.
Except this is a very long thread, so you could recognize that kind of context. Now, skipping a few comments, and a different user by the name American Zombie DOS, who then comments to Through the Smoke, which at the time he was named Zero Man America. Yeah, let's see. American Zombie DOS comments to him, "Yeah, it's libertarianism that is to blame for the fall of Western civilization. If only we had central banking, a welfare state, and a warfare state, and tried collectivist National Socialism sometime in the past, then we wouldn't be faced with all these problems. Right?" Followed by a question mark. Reminds me of Molyneux's anti-libertarian speech when he went on a tangent about the Iraq War and how libertarians have blood on their hands. Now, I don't understand the context of what Molyneux said, so how on earth
I'm not surprised.
Libertarians have anything to do with the Iraq War? That was a neoconservative movement.
Right. I'm not surprised. I think I'm not. Look, I used to watch Stefan Molyneux until he began turning racist, and I had to stop watching. He is so politically inconsistent. He is as inconsistent as a mime. Essentially, I mean, his inconsistency is astounding. He literally, one moment he's narrow-capitalist, one moment he is a with the alt-right. You don't know what he is. He is politically inconsistent. As it goes with this thread, what is the broader point you're trying to illustrate there? Because the argument of the initial comment is that it seems to insinuate that human nature is good on some level, and therefore any rebellion against that is a bad thing. Which would, I have a bunch of arguments against that. So what is the broader point of this?
Because this is where the moment I debated with that, well, I soon later found out he seems to be an alt-righter.
No kidding.
And then I debated with him. And that's because I was actually in a transitional phase from being how do I describe this? An irrational libertarian to more of a fusionist, because I'm starting to transition. I was already changing my views regarding libertarianism. By the way, Roy Philosopher, you do realize we're still live, right?
Yes. Is there any activity in the comments?
Let's see. No. No. Wait, what on earth? It stopped screen sharing.
Some odd reason.
Okay. Can you still see anything?
No, I can't. Yes.
What is it? Am I back to screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, my comment was to him, I think stating that libertarians reject human nature is a bit of a straw man. What kind of libertarians have you encountered? Of course, there would be a class hierarchy in a capitalist society. Only socialists and communists wish to abolish a class hierarchy. Capitalism still has classes, but also lifts the poor out of poverty the most. And before you strawman me, I'm not an anarchist, I'm a minarchist. I don't believe anarchy is possible, but a small government is possible, as that worked in the 19th century in the US and in the mid 19th century in the UK, where roads were built by private companies that were paid through donations. Do you understand the context of my comment?
I will not pretend to be an expert on the situation in England, but in the 19th century in America, absolutely yes.
Well, okay, then through the smoke responded to me. Hierarchy means nobility, aristocracy, and monarchy. Well, apparently I had a different definition of hierarchy because I thought I was referring to hierarchy in general, as in upper, middle, and lower classes. Okay, finishing his comment, becoming a rich man does not make you upper class. Libertarianism doesn't work because it always devolves into modern-day liberal democracies. It's only a hop, skip, and jump from Enlightenment to Marx, and it will happen every single time.
Okay.
The Rome, what is it?
Lewis, I'm not trying to interrupt your story, but I think this is becoming a bit long-winded. If this, you're telling me that in hindsight, this is what issued your conversion to fusionism.
Yes, albeit gradually.
Well,
at the time.
Well, I can see why it would have, but his arguments are he has a central premise that is false, and I won't even discuss it because it's so overused. It's not even unique. I'm not impressed. But I understand why it aroused this sense of skepticism in you. I understand why. What I would say is that when one thinks more clearly about these kind of arguments, and when one debates people more, one tends to gain an experience that will prove invaluable in being able to decide these kind of things. Because you can't learn how to debate from a comment section or even from a book. You have to have experience. That's the biggest thing. And you have experience. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying in general. I'm getting experience. So, in hindsight, his arguments are not very convincing, but I understand why it prompted a change. So we have 2 people watching. Are you still right? Or how many people do I watch?
I think I see 1. It claims to have 1 viewer left.
Okay. I think this is a perfect point to end the stream. As we lost battle on thought, and it's just basically us talking, and it's kind of late already. So I thank you so much for having me on. You have no idea.
So you're about to leave now?
Yes. But my final words. Thank you so much for having me on. You have no idea how grateful I
am. Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't making it through with the story, but I'm going to say the ending of the story outright. The reason the alt-right, one of the many reasons, and it's one of the darker truths of the rising alt-right, is that many of the members of the alt-right were former libertarians. Of course, it would be some fascists and Nazis in there, but many of them were former libertarians. And I was about to show you something else, but if you're about to leave, well, I guess...
You can show me it on another platform, all right?
Yes. Okay. I mean, and as for the person I debated, well, he eventually called me a libertarian, even though in one of my comments I made it clear about the importance of culture and religion as I was transitioning to a fusionist. As I'm not even sure if that's the right word. I mean, I once liked Sargon, but once I discovered the distributists and Fritz and Pyrrha, I suddenly changed my positions on the free market.
Right.
and along with Mr. E and Son of Tiamat.
Right. I think it's an interesting conversion, most definitely. These are people I would love, if you can get in contact with me, I would love to talk to them, I'd love to debate them. Love to. But as I said, I have got to run. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it beyond anything in the world. You have given me a broader platform to speak. You have given me, just thank you, okay?
Okay, then. So was the stream good, though? I'm going to stop
Oh,
broadcasting.
yes. Yes, okay.